government and the liberation tiger of Tamil and the ongoing crisis in Nepal, while critically evaluating the role of the media on these processes in each member country of SAARC and reflecting upon the independence of media in the post-9/11 scenario and the bloodshed in Iraq, arrived at the following broader understanding. Reiterating our commitment to peaceful resolution of all intra-state conflicts in South Asia through sustained and productive dialogue, while rejecting the use of force both by state and non-state actors and coercive or sham diplomacy to solve differences and disputes as enshrined in SAFMA's Kathmandu Declaration on Media and Peace, New Delhi Declaration on Interstate Conflicts in South Asia, and Colombo Declaration on Intrastate Conflicts in South Asia. Recalling our resolve to rise above the national, ethnic, religious and ideological divides while performing our professional duties as reporters, opinion makers, producers and compares, without indulging in acrimony, falsification, demonization, jingoism or embedding with respective official roles. Restating our adherence to the roadmap and guidelines adopted by SAFMA's conference at Dhaka on regional cooperation in South Asia that showed the path to all-sided regional cooperation in the best interests of all countries of the region. Appreciating joint statements of January 6th and September 24th issued by Pakistan and India, initiating composite dialogue, stopping cross-border infiltration and repression, exploring all possible options on Kashmir to find a solution to the satisfaction of peoples of Jammu and Kashmir and India and Pakistan, and simultaneously normalizing relations, taking confidence-building measures in all spheres and expanding areas of bilateral cooperation. Taking note of...
please be quiet.
Please pay attention, everybody. Taking note of set of options proposed to open a debate on the Kashmir imbroglio by President Pervez Musharraf, reduction in troops deployed in J&K announced by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and confidence-building measures being proposed by the two governments regarding Kashmir, including proposed bus services between Srinagar and Muzaffarabad, Jammu and Sialkot. Concerned about the deadlock over resumption of dialogue between the government of Sri Lanka and the FPT, cognizant of various serious differences between Bangladesh and India over cross-border infiltration, redemarcation of certain points of border, including numerous enclaves, redistribution of water and issues of trade, etc. Worried about the continuing political and constitutional crisis in Nepal, Maoist insurgency, delaying resumption of dialogue between the Maoists and the government and the palace and the political parties. Taking serious exception to the pretext of using inter- and interstate conflicts of war against terrorism to clip civil liberties, introduce draconian laws, suppression of the democratic aspirations of the people, violence against the civilian populations, especially women and children, who often become a victim in the crossfire of parties to the conflict. Appreciating the voices of sanity for peaceful resolution of conflicts from the civil societies and the media, while expressing disappointment over those sections of media still embedded to the so-called national consensus or respective establishments. Welcoming the visit of Pakistani journalists across the line of control and return visits by the journalists to this side of LOC that have set a good precedent to open all no-go areas to journalists. Encouraged by the decision of the last SAARC Council of Ministers meeting to associate SAFMA as an associate body of SAARC, and an assurance given by New Delhi and Islamabad regarding liberalization of visa regime for the journalists across South Asia, an announcement by the Ministry of External Affairs of India to relatively relax visa for the Pakistani journalists, with the hope that Islamabad reciprocates the gesture. Louder! Oh, easy. The conference resolves that the peoples of... Yeah. You can also follow it on page 77. I am now on. Yeah.
Play.
Because it is already written, yes. If anybody has got any suggestions...
No, you have to read out.
Read out.
You have to read out.
The conference resolves that the peoples of South Asia have suffered too much and for too long due to inter- and interstate conflicts. Some of the disputes are perennial, that sustain hostility and proliferate ancillary disputes, which further complicate the prospects of regional peace and postpone the agenda of regional cooperation.
Very quickly over here, people of South Asia would like to see that there will be a step to put the two nuclear powers into move the process of denuclearization and subject it to international.
What amendment you are proposing?
One amendment in number 8 is, as nuclear powers putting at risk the entire region. India and Pakistan must respect the desire for peace of their peoples and get them subjected to international control and international review.
What does it mean?
But the need the two powers in order to carry the fear and apprehension of South Asian people.
So just three tiny changes. On page 76, paragraph I, taking serious exception to the pretext of using inter- and intrastate conflict or war against terrorism to clip civil liberties, introduce draconian laws, suppress, etc., etc. I would suggest adding, after introduce draconian laws, I would suggest repress human rights defenders and journalists in particular. Because I think...
Sorry, you repeat?
in second paragraph I, second line, clip civil liberties, introduce draconian laws, repress human rights defenders and in particular journalists. Because I think, as we saw yesterday, that whenever there's state repression, human rights defenders and journalists are always at the vanguard, are always at the forefront of all the
Thank you very much. I think we do not have an objection to this. I think this makes our resolution program here.
Then second small change, page 78, paragraph 15, call upon all the governments and the parties to the conflict.
Paragraph 15.
Paragraph 15, yes.
Yeah.
Call upon all fundamental human rights, because we have repeatedly seen in this region how, as I said, governments reappropriate the discourse of human rights to say human rights of groups or of communities and this and that, and using that as a way to violate.
Srinagar and Muzaffarabad, Jammu and Sialkot. I would like to, just add that if we could, fully and strongly endorse this, number one. Number two, the F part concerned about the deadlock or resumption of dialogue between government of Sri Lanka and LTTE. If we could also add concern about the deadlock or the dialogue between the Kashmiri leadership and New Delhi. And then I would also like to, add here that if we could also say that concern about the increasing human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir from both the sides. In the part here, I want to say that we need to say we fully endorse these initiatives about bus service and confidence building measures.
Yes.
If we can add that word.
No, what we have already done that. What you are adding it? What you are adding to?
In the E part, I am saying that where we have said
Taking note of set of. My dear, we are taking all note of everything.
just note. I am saying that endorsement number one.
No, taking note of endorsement. Why should we endorse? How can I endorse many things said by President Musharraf?
We could support it.
No, we cannot. We cannot. Everybody has got many views here. We cannot have
But we have appreciated all the peace moves.
We are just taking note of.
Okay.
Yes.
Number two, the concern about deadlock or resumption of dialogue between government of Sri Lanka and LTTE. We would also say that concern about the deadlock or the dialogue between Kashmiri leadership and New Delhi. There is a deadlock between
I think this is sufficient. This is sufficient. We have emphasized at more than 2 points that Kashmiris should be engaged in the process. We have restated the action which we took in New Delhi. New Delhi government has said unconditional dialogue. Okay, they have said. Now there are, listen to me. Now there is a debate whether Hurriyat or some leaders have said that okay, they will be allowed to first go there, and they said no precondition. They said no, this is no precondition. It's going on. I think the government of India has shown its willingness to talk to the Kashmiri leaders without conditions, and this is appreciable. However, this delay, and of course there will be delay in the procedure of the things. We should not get into those very detailed indicators. This is my proposal.
Mr. Manmohan Singh, our Prime Minister, has said that dialogue will be held in the framework of Indian Constitution. So he has put a condition on that. So it's bit conditional.
These are many statements which are coming and from Pakistan and India. We just cannot take on daily basis the position or shifting position of foreign officers or their spokesmen. What we are saying is, what we have seen that when we say January 6 statement and September 24 statement, that is 2 substantial documents, and they very explicitly state the mandate. So when they say okay, that we will explore all options, possible options in Kashmir, They commit themselves to that position. Now, when governments come under pressure and they take postal public consumption and other things, we just cannot get into that. If you want to say add any other thing which you think will make the process more consistent, in terms of making the process more consistent, then you may propose anything. But we cannot take on daily basis the flow and ebb of the diplomacy. We just cannot intervene with that speed. We will have to have our own foreign officers. That will be difficult. This is taken from the preamble. This is a better term which we have in fact got from Khalid Ahmed's speech, and which became part of the preamble of the some part of that of our New Delhi Declaration. The term of perennial disputes and ancillary disputes. The theory was, or the thesis was, that the major dispute has produced more ancillary disputes. So that is in that context. However, if there is an issue of cross-border infiltration, we have already stated that in the preamble, and that is there. We have restated our support to the January 6th statement. January 6th statement and January and September 24th statement that explicitly stops if Pakistan from indulging any kind of cross-border infiltration. Number 12, page 78. The political conflict in Sri Lanka, and now again, this is a summary of
What was that?
more tight summary of what was said in interest on the declaration of Colombo Declaration of on intrastate conflicts.
It's this line that you want, and the continuing killings and human rights violations condemned.
Okay, you want that? This is 1312, no?
Yeah.
The political conflict in Sri Lanka that has assumed an ethnic conflict from due to marginalization, exclusion of ethnic minorities, blah blah blah. Where do we want the amendment?
After territorial integrity of the state, in the interim, the ceasefire agreement of 2002 needs to be strengthened,
Yeah.
and the continuing human rights violations and killings condemned. They haven't.
We should go on that. No? In the interim, the ceasefire agreement also need to be strengthened, and the needs of the people of war strengthened, and what is that? Read out.
The continuing human rights violations and killings condemned.
And condemned in territory be stopped. Instead of condemning, we should condemn it in preamble. Stopped. Okay. Next, the other need of the predominantly Tamil and Muslim peoples of the former conflict regions requires the establishment of an interim administration, that we have already said. Above all, dialogue must be resumed. This we have already said. So that will be added. Condemned. Just give me that. You are adding it from here?
From after integrity.
No, before we do it without ensuring
Needs to be strengthened.
and stopping
Continuing human rights.
stopping all kinds of human rights violations.
Should go in the first part, because this is not a resolution.
Point
This
6.
is an understanding. This is a very minor point, you can ignore it.
What is that?
Move point
1
6
and
from page
6 should go
77.
to the first part, which is
To move
understanding and
Point
not to
6,
resolve, because
to
they
shift
have
it to the
nothing to
there's
resolve.
nothing to resolve there.
This is very simple and a minor
Good.
suggestion, you can ignore it.
No. It's very good, Professor.
My other point is, it is number, it is J on page 77 on the top.
Same page.
In the fourth line, it says, expressing disappointment over those sections of media still embedded to the so-called national consensus or respective establishments. The media is generally said to be embedded in an organization or the establishment. That is okay. But I think the reference to the so-called national consensus is very dubious, because if the Pakistan, there is consensus to have normal relations with India, would you like to be disappointed with that? So it creates an ambiguity, this kind of disappointment.
Sir, I beg to differ. I agree with your first proposal that this 6 can go to preamble, no problem. But the second thing is that we know what about, we are very specific at the moment. We are calling for the journalists, rise above the national setting, rise above that, don't become a prisoner of the whole thinking. We are calling and calling. We mean that, in that narrow sense. Of course, we are for amity, we are saying, we are building that if there is a national concern in Pakistan to have find a solution. And what is that? So we will not be, of course, we are for some kind of consensus which could lead to some kind of a solution. So we are not, in fact, which is yet to come out of the womb of the process initiated. So when that will come, we'll take a position, whether that satisfies us or not. So this is at the moment what we are referring to, the old positions, stated positions, rigid positions, which have not helped to move forward. We are just referring to that. There is no confusion with this. Thank you very much for 100% national consensus of South Asia, including Maulana Fazlur Rahman, who is the leader of the MMA, and Lahore Baloch, who is of Jamaat Islami, and Mr. Mushayr Hussain, who is the General Secretary of PML ruling party, and Mr. Izzad Ahsan, who is the leader of Pakistan People's Party, and Dr. Mubashir Hassan, who is the leader of India-Pakistan People's Forum for Peace and Democracy. In this session, we have Pakistan's leading politicians from 5 or 4 major groupings. And we have Senator Mushayr Hussain, who is the General Secretary of Pakistan Muslim League, which is the leading coalition party in this government. And we have Mohtarma Tahmeena Daultana, who is the Senior Vice President of Pakistan Muslim League, and she is a member of National Assembly, that is lower house. And we have Chaudhry Izzad Ahsan, Barrister Izzad Ahsan, who is a very leading parliamentarian and leader of the Pakistan People's Party. And I think hopefully we'll have Maulana Fazlur Rahman, who is the leader of MMA and leader of the opposition in the National Assembly, and also Mr. Lahore Baloch, who is also MNA from Lahore and Jamaat Islami. Let me precisely brief. Oh, sorry. And we have above all very senior politician and the leading peace activist. He showed the SAFMA the way, the road we took. He is the leader of Indo-Pak People's Forum for Peace and Democracy, and joined me in applauding and welcoming these guests to this conference. To brief our honorable guests, that we had held 5 exhaustive sessions of this conference in which we evaluated the reconciliation processes in South Asia, also reflected upon the independence of media after 9/11, and also critically evaluated the role of media in our countries of the region regarding reconciliation processes, visa regime by New Delhi. There we had proposed, which was not read out in fact, which I am reading out, what President Pervez Musharraf announced at this conference to allow journalists from the member countries of SAARC to visit the whole of Pakistan. Since we had drafted this before his announcement, so we are acknowledging that and bringing that part of it.
Gentlemen from South Asia, I must first express my deep gratitude to SAFMA for giving me the privilege of coming here and speaking to such an august house of enlightened persons from this entire region that we live in. And the important thing, the importance of this great event, and this is not the first that SAFMA has conducted, is that there is a recognition and a growing recognition that while individuals and families can change neighbors, states cannot change neighbors. So we are stuck by destiny, by geography, and by fate to live with each other as neighbors. And I think SAFMA is personally, my own view, is doing a great job. And as I said, I not only consider it a privilege that I have been invited to speak here, but I have taken it so seriously that while the Maulana arrives late, I came from Cairo and well in time. Tomorrow I have to appear in the Supreme Court in a case of one of South Asia's longest serving, one of, not all, there have been many more, but one of South Asia's longest serving prisoner, Mr. Asif Ali Zardari. I hope you'll all hope that he gets bail after 8 years in this present democratic system. I've been here and I've found people, of course, congratulating General Musharraf for what is said, initiating a debate on Kashmir, on solutions on Kashmir. Of course, it's a good thing to debate. Of course, nobody can say that we must retain in our contacts, in our dialogue, in our discourses, discussions and meetings, the old mindset. Something new has, of course, to be thought of and devised. Something's got to give, as they say. It's been appreciated here. I digress, quite frankly. I must not vitiate the atmosphere of great cordiality that SAFMA has produced and continues to produce and continues to recreate. Because this is an amazing forum, and these are very definitive times indeed, with so much happening around the globe. And I think, when I come to think of it, what are media persons supposed to do to contribute? Of course, you're all very eminent minds, eminent intellectuals, writers, thinkers. So you must have in these 2 days thought of most of what I am going to say. You must have indeed thought of that, articulated that, put that down in pen, on black and white, on paper, in many times over in the last 4 or 5 of your annual events. I happen to had the privilege of hosting your delegates on the first and inaugural event in Islamabad, the inaugural event of SAFMA. But having said that, everybody has his own point of view. I think what we need to establish, we've had 57 years of trying to prove that we, at least on this Pakistani side, that we were different. We've had 57 years trying to prove and establish to the world and to our own people that we are un-India. That is why we took Pakistan, because we were not Indians. Indians were somehow different and we were un-India. Now Pakistan has come to stay. There is no basis really for us continuing to establish the diversity. There is much great need to establish and come out strongly with strong and effective penmanship to establish the commonality. There is so much common, and that commonality must be the basis of the weapon and the vehicle that vitiates hostility. We spent too much and used up too much ink and paper on establishing, developing hostility for fear that if we do not establish the diversity.
People in our country want progress, want development, want poverty to be removed, and these are the things that we would like to have in our country. What we would like to have in South Asia, in our region over here, is an understanding between us. And that understanding can only develop when the people can speak to each other. Because we have borders touching India, I would like to say that the issues which are concerning to India are some things which are very near to our heart, and we would like them to be solved, because then we can further move on to the other countries. But when there is not an understanding between these two countries, then the strength weakens. That understanding can only when we can sit down and solve the issue. Like Baglia Dam, it's being made on Chenab River. Another dam is going to be made on Neelam. Another one, Vula Barrage. You see, we have to sit down and see that our neighbor, what does our neighbor want? Does he want a dry Pakistan? Does he want that they should not be, agriculturally we should not be strong? These are the various things that we need to sit down and see. We have to look at these issues. Kashmir is very near to our heart. We cannot just talk about peace, unity. The media has a very important role to play. And the media has to, as the media is, and I would like to appreciate what SAFMA is doing. And the way, until you do communicate, you're not able to speak to each other, you're not to have an understanding. So we have to sit down and solve these various issues, and the media can play a very important role. I would like to mention something. I remember as a small child, I was only 5 years old. 5 means many years ago, but being a woman, I will not disclose my age because that is not something that we'd like to do. But I remember that 5-year-old child when we went to India. I was there with my parents. And all of a sudden, I do not know the place, somewhere in Delhi, we were stopped. My father was stopped, and a group of Hindus came and met him. And the way they were meeting him, I quietly pulled at my mother's sari. She was wearing a sari there. And I pulled at her sari. I said, "Who are they?" And she said, "They are some Indians that your father knows." But I said, "Aren't Indians our enemies? How does my father know them?" She said, "No." And then I repeated that question to my father. He said, "No. They were our friends who left Vihari at that time, and now they are here and they want all of us to go there." These were various questions which used to ponder in my mind throughout my schooling and then in my college. But now when I go to India, I see that it was basically a fear that maybe we could not be taken over by the Indians. That was a fear between both the countries, or that we, Pakistanis, we are not good people, we only create trouble for India. No, that's not true. We do not want that, and Pakistan Muslim League does not want that. Otherwise, they would not have signed the Lahore resolution under Minar-e-Pakistan. They want a settlement. They want the issues to be settled, because until we do not solve those issues, we might meet as often as we like. The problem will remain. So we have to wish well for India. India has to wish well for Pakistan. Then we will be able to cement a relationship that will help us. Because it's not that. After 9/11, the situation has changed. It's not only that it has changed for Muslims or it has changed for Pakistanis. I think the situation has changed for Asians at large. They're all in a problem. We all have to get together and say, no, you cannot deal with us like this. We have to talk about us being as human as the Americans. And we should not be afraid to say that. Look, America is fine. You're doing well in your area. Everybody in this area is not a terrorist. What is taking place in Wana or what is taking place in Balochistan is not what we would want. And Pakistan is being pressurized for that. Why should we be pressurized? Why should we have to join in and send our armies to Iraq? Why? Why can't we all sit together and say, let's talk of peace? What's happening in Iraq is not right. Has happened in Afghanistan is not proper. The way Afghanistan is not being built is not right. But we can only do it when we ourselves are united. When we ourselves have one voice. It is very convenient that each one of us should have a problem within our countries. Each border in SAARC is having a problem. Why can't we sit down and solve those problems? It can be done when you can have dialogue. And that is why we would like to have dialogue in Pakistan. In Pakistan, in my country, that is why we are struggling for democracy. I remember, as Etazaz Bhai was mentioning, I was just thinking of the time I was in jail. That little lockup of mine, in which I was put in, there was an Indian woman there. And when I was supposed to be put in, they said, oh, that lockup is on one side. It was a death cell. It is on one side. Put her in there. They said, there's an Indian woman. They said, remove her and put her on somewhere else. I remember the second time, I've been in and out of jail 9 times. So the second time I was put in, I remember that Indian woman came. She said, you have come back again? You're going to take my cell again? I said, look, I don't come because I want to come. I come because they put me here. The thing is, you have to have a democratic system here also. I do not want that in my country, when we talk of dictatorship, when we talk of putting people in jail, like Javed Hashmi is in jail for over 1 year. He read a letter and he's in. Asif Zardari is in 7-8 years. Yusuf Raza Gilani is in. It's not the way things should be. And that is important, that when we have a democratic system everywhere, when people will speak, when people will sit and talk, governments will have to listen. But it is important. I'm not talking about uniform. It doesn't matter who is in uniform, who is not in uniform. Every institution in my country has to be strengthened. The parliament has to be strengthened. If my Prime Minister says that I would like that the opposition should support us, Prime Minister, right here I would like to say this. We will support you, but stand on your own 2 feet. Don't be the boss. Don't say that somebody else is your boss. Be the boss. The parliament will support you. The opposition will support you. The people of this country will support you. But stand on your own feet. Because then you will make the correct decision. And at this sensitive time in Southeast Asia, we need to make decisions. Very important decisions. With nuclear powers sitting as neighbors, we cannot take any risks.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be here. Mr. Riazuddin, Secretary General, Starting off on what a colleague said, I think irrespective of the party, the important thing is that whether we in the political field and the government have the courage to take the correct decisions which affect the people of this country. And whether it's this regime or the previous regime, as long as we can demonstrate that we have the courage to take those correct decisions which will change the destiny of the people, I think that is the important thing. And I think this government, this party has demonstrated that it has that courage despite resistance, despite opposition. I'm very grateful that SAFMA has taken this initiative, and this initiative is important because the media in South Asia's democracies, of which Pakistan is one, as you can see, we live in a society where the media is free, the civil society is vibrant, and there is political pluralism as demonstrated on the podium itself. The capacity of the media to influence policies, to shape perceptions, and also to change minds. My friend Imtiaz Alam referred to the recent delegation of the SAFMA which went to occupied Kashmir. And we, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, of which I'm also the chairman, we took the initiative to invite them. And before that, one of our members from the opposition, Professor Khurshid Ahmed, who is vice chairman of the MMA, a leader of the Jamaat Islami, he had asked me that this delegation should not go to Indian occupied Kashmir because it would be against the national interest. And after listening to the discourse of the journalists in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he said he had changed his mind. And he felt that visit was important, visit was positive, and visit was useful. And I think that is the important role. And Mr. Imtiaz Alam, you referred to the role. I would say that 20 years ago, the Muslim, when I was the editor, we had taken the initiative in April 1984 to organize the first such conclave in South Asia of the media. Dr. Mubashir Hassan, Aitzaz Hassan were there. Aitzaz was then also in the People's Party opposition. And we had Kuldeep Nair, Bhavani Sen Gupta, Prem Bhatia, Khushwant Singh, Pran Chopra, among others, in Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, other people. And it was in our newspaper that for the first time, Indian journalists were published on a regular basis, starting with Kuldeep Nair and Bhavani Sen Gupta. So the media has played a role in this interaction, and I think this interaction is important. And I remember when I was information minister and the Kargil conflict had taken place, the Indians promptly banned Pakistan television because of the conflict situation. There was a lot of pressure on us to ban Indian news channels, but we declined because we felt that we have to have the other side also to be heard, and we refused to do that. And that's why I feel that if currently there is a certain ban still taking place by the information ministry, it doesn't make sense because we get the Indian other channels, the Sony, the entertainment. And in this regard, I would also like to say that once this interaction increases, it does not just demolish the walls of ignorance and misperceptions. It's important also for the decision makers. I remember when we were going nuclear in response to India's nuclear tests, we were closely monitoring how India would respond to Pakistan's decision. And in 1998, it was 28th of May, before that, the attitude was very arrogant. The tone of Mr. Advani was very threatening, especially a statement of 17th of May 1998 when he said that Pakistan would have to change its outlook and policies, and it was a very haughty and arrogant tone. But when Pakistan went nuclear on 28th of May, we saw a discernible change of Indian attitude and tone. The Indian Parliament was in session, which was promptly adjourned. It seemed that the Indian leadership was taken by surprise. They were in a state of shock how it happened, and their faces fell, and they didn't know how to handle it. They were in emergency sessions. And when Mr. Vajpayee came to Lahore in February 1999, and this I give you as an illustration of the level of ignorance, not just in the media as people see it, but also in the decision makers at the highest level. I asked one of the important people with Mr. Vajpayee, and I was his minister in waiting then, that why was this kind of reaction evident from the Indian side? And he said there were two reasons for that. He gave two different. One view was in the Indian establishment that Pakistan did not have the bomb, that Pakistan was bluffing, and so the bluff had been called. The other view was that even if the Pakistanis have the bomb, they will not have the courage to test because the Americans will not let them. And since the assumption was that the American influence is so paramount in Pakistan, that the decision to go nuclear would depend on whether the US allowed them that privilege. On both counts, they were proven wrong. So I think that this media interaction is important, and I think our friends from South Asia who are here also need to understand the context of the current policies, where we have seen a change of environment in South Asia, especially from the Pakistani perspective, when there is an element to reach out, and this reaching out is not just from civil society, this reaching out is from the military establishment as well, this reaching out is from the religious right as well, elements which were in the past perceived as impediments to normalization of relations in South Asia. And I think we got to understand some of the important factors that have led to this process. First and foremost, I would say, is the nuclearization of South Asia. India going nuclear, Pakistan responding in kind. That has given the people of Pakistan, the state of Pakistan, more self-assurance and confidence about negotiating with India, interacting with India, opening up with India. Because the issues in the mind of the people of Pakistan regarding the security of the state of Pakistan or the survival of the state of Pakistan, which people had talked about in the past, those issues are now settled after Pakistan going nuclear, and that has been demonstrated by the 2002 nuclear crisis, or the crisis of near war between Pakistan and India in 2002. Press in Pakistan is freer on foreign policy today than the American media, quote unquote, because of what was happening. I think that is the basic lesson which has to be imbibed by our friends across the border. India, there's talk of democracy there, but I think that Pakistani journalists have shown the courage to differ, to dissent from the officially certified truth on Kashmir in a more general and a more extensive sense than have our colleagues in India on the same issue of Kashmir, where we see that the monolithic voice of the Indian establishment on Kashmir, despite realities to the contrary inside the valley and occupied Kashmir, are reflected somewhat regularly, and the dissent is rarer there than is the case in Pakistan. And of course, it's far more rare now in the American media as far as the so-called war on terrorism goes, and as was demonstrated by their attitude of acquiescence on Iraq after 9/11. So I think that the Indian media needs to do more to present the reality of Pakistan, the reality of a new Pakistan, which is a self-starter, vibrant, dynamic society based on pluralism of all kinds, and where dissent is now part of the established system. And secondly, as far as the Indian government and the Indian establishment is concerned, I think we also have to understand there has to be policies of reciprocity to enable Pakistan also to move forward on the track that we have embarked on regarding Kashmir and bilateral relations. And finally, my friend who is not here, Itzaz Hasan Saab, has talked of learning from Europe. The basic lesson of history is that you can only move forward when you reverse wrongs. And those wrongs, when they are reversed, and when there's an acknowledgement of treading a new path, changing course, changing direction, when that is evident, especially in the case of Kashmir, which has seen this uprising for the last 15 years, then I think you will have a more conducive environment for moving forward on a common destiny for the people of South Asia.
اس میں کوئی شک نہیں ہے کہ تقسیم ہند سے لے کر قیام پاکستان سے لے کر آج تک ہندوستان اور پاکستان کے تعلقات میں بگاڑ کا سب سے بڑا سبب اور بنیادی سبب مسئلہ کشمیر رہا ہے. لیکن زمانہ ایک جگہ رکا نہیں ہے. زمانے کا فطری تسلسل جاری ہے اور ماضی قریب میں پوری انسانیت عالمی انقلابات اور عالمی تغیرات سے متاثر ہے. ہماری زندگی میں جہاں اور بہت سے واقعات ہماری نظر میں ہیں، سوویت یونین کا خاتمہ تاریخ کا بہت بڑا واقعہ ہے. سوویت یونین کے خاتمے نے دنیا میں تبدیلیاں پیدا کی. اور اس وقت پوری دنیا یک محوریت کا اور یک مرکزیت کا شکار ہے. پوری دنیا کی تمام پالیسیاں ایک محور کی طرف مرتکز ہو گئی ہیں. اور سوویت یونین کے خاتمے کے بعد دنیا میں بہت سی تبدیلیاں آئیں، حتیٰ کہ جغرافیائی تبدیلیاں رونما ہوئیں، اقتصادی پالیسی میں تبدیلیاں آئیں، قوموں کے درمیان تعلقات کی ترجیحات تبدیل ہو گئیں. عالمی سطح پر گروپنگ کی بجائے علاقائی اتحاد وجود پذیر ہونے لگے اور ان کی اہمیت بڑھنے لگی. اور ابھی اس عالمی تغیر کے نتیجے میں جو فطری اور طبعی اقدامات دنیا میں ہو رہے تھے، وہاں 9/11 کا واقعہ ایک بہت بڑا واقعہ ہے جس نے ایک بار پھر بڑے مختصر عرصے میں دنیا بھر کی سیاست کا رخ تبدیل کر دیا. اس وقت موقع اس کا نہیں ہے کہ ہم چھوٹے چھوٹے جزیات پر بحث کر سکیں. اور پھر ہم لوگ جس خطے سے وابستہ ہیں، حکمرانوں کی غلطیاں ہو سکتی ہیں، ان کے اقدامات سے اختلاف ہو سکتا ہے، لیکن مجموعی طور پر اور بالخصوص انڈیا پاکستان کے عوام کا ذہن اور ان کا ماحول جمہوری ہے، اور وہ بین الاقوامی مسائل، باہمی مسائل اور داخلی مسائل میں امتیاز کو جانتے ہیں. اس تناظر میں جب ہم اپنے اس خطے کے معاملات اور مسائل کو دیکھتے ہیں تو یہاں عوام کے احساسات میں بھی تبدیلی آئی ہے. جہاں دنیا بھر میں تبدیلیاں رونما ہو رہی ہیں، ہم عالمی سطح پر ابھرنے والے تغیرات کے اثرات سے متاثر ہوئے بغیر نہیں رہ سکتے. اور ظاہر ہے کہ انڈیا اور پاکستان کے عوام میں ایک خواہش ابھری ہے، دونوں ممالک کے عوام اور ہر شعبہ زندگی سے وابستہ لوگ برملا اس بات کا اظہار کر چکے ہیں کہ ہمیں اپنے تنازعات کے حل کی طرف جانا ہوگا، تنازعات کے پرامن حل کی طرف جانا ہوگا، اور تنازعات کا پرامن حل گولی سے ممکن نہیں ہے، بولی سے ہی ممکن ہے۔ مذاکرات کے بغیر پرامن حل کا کوئی راستہ نہیں ہے۔ اقوام متحدہ کا منشور UN چارٹر تنازعات کے پرامن حل کی بات کرتا ہے، تنازعات کو طے کرنے کے لیے طاقت کے استعمال کی بات نہیں کرتا۔ اور میں یہ کہنے میں حق بجانب ہوں کہ تنازعات کو طے کرنے کے لیے طاقت کے استعمال کا جو رجحان ہے، بالخصوص عالمی قوتیں جس رجحان کو فروغ دے رہی ہیں، بڑے مختصر عرصے میں پوری انسانیت نے اس بات کا مشاہدہ کر لیا ہے کہ 9/11 کے بعد کے اقدامات نے شدت کو فروغ دیا ہے، شدت کا خاتمہ نہیں کیا۔ خون ریزی کو فروغ دیا ہے، خون ریزی کا خاتمہ نہیں کیا۔ جس کو وہ دہشت گردی کہتے ہیں، اس کو فروغ دیا ہے، اس کا خاتمہ نہیں ہو سکا ہے۔ اور مجھے اس بات کی اجازت دیں کہ 9/11 کے واقعے کے بعد قوموں کی آزادی کا سوال پیدا ہو گیا ہے دوبارہ۔ 9/11 کے واقعے کے بعد پوری دنیا میں انسانی حقوق کا سوال پیدا ہو گیا ہے۔ وہ مغربی دنیا جو کسی وقت جمہوریت کے علمبردار، آزادی کے علمبردار، انسانی حقوق کے علمبردار نظر آ رہے تھے، آج ان کی ترجیحات بدلتی ہوئی نظر آ رہی ہیں۔ یہ اجتماع غنیمت اجتماع ہے، ہمیں اس کا فائدہ اٹھانا ہوگا۔ عراق کی صورتحال ہو یا افغانستان کی صورتحال، اس وقت اس تنازع کے پس منظر پر بحث کرنے کا موقع نہیں ہے، لیکن خود امریکہ اور برطانیہ کے سرکاری اعلانات، سرکاری اعترافات نے اقوام متحدہ کے سیکریٹری جنرل کو باضابطہ طور پر یہ بیان جاری کرنے پر مجبور کیا کہ عراق پر حملے کا کوئی قانونی جواز نہیں تھا۔ اور 9/11 کے واقعے کے حوالے سے امریکہ میں قائم کیا گیا تحقیقاتی کمیشن اور اس کی رپورٹ نے افغانستان پر حملے کے جواز کو متاثر کیا ہے۔ یہ ساری چیزیں منظر عام پر آ رہی ہیں۔ اور ابھی جب میں تقریر کے لیے اٹھنے والا تھا تو ایک صحافی کا خط مجھے ملا کہ یہاں پاکستان میں الجزیرہ اور العربیہ کے 2 صحافیوں کو امریکی فوجیوں نے گرفتار کر لیا ہے۔ لاہور میں ایک ریڈیو چینل جس پر BBC کی خبریں آ رہی تھی بند کر دیا گیا ہے۔ جہاں ہم سیاستدانوں کی گرفتاریوں کی بات کرتے ہیں، ہمارے محترم ہیں، میں پاکستان میں ان گرفتاریوں کو سیاسی گرفتاری کہتا ہوں، اور یہ جمہوریت اور جمہوری آزادی پر ایک آمرانہ وار سے اس کو تعبیر کرتا ہوں، لیکن ساتھ ساتھ یہ بھی دیکھنا ہوگا کہ صحافی لوگ اور لوگوں تک خبریں پہنچانے والے چینلز آج دھمکیوں کے زد میں ہیں اور آہنی ہاتھ ان تک بھی پہنچنے سے گریز نہیں کر رہے ہیں۔ ایسی صورتحال میں ہمارا یہ موقف روز بروز حقیقت بنتا چلا جا رہا ہے۔ اور ویسے آپ صحافی لوگ بیٹھے ہیں، 9/11 کے بعد جو واقعات ہوئے ہیں، جو چیزیں قطعی طور پر حقیقت نہیں ہوتی، حقائق کے بالکل برعکس کسی چیز کو حقیقت بنا لینا، یہ آپ حضرات کا اور اس دنیا کا فن ہو سکتا ہے۔ اور 9/11 کے بعد کی جو صورتحال پیدا ہوئی ہے، جہاں کوئی حقیقت موجود نہیں، اس کو حقیقت بنا لینا، اس کو دنیا پر حملہ آور ہونے کے لیے جواز بنا دینا، یہ میرے خیال میں بہرحال اس میں اگر میں آپ سے بڑے ادب و احترام کے ساتھ شکایت کروں کہ اس میں میڈیا کا اور عالمی میڈیا کا بہت بڑا کردار ہے، تو اس پر آپ ناراض یا خفا نہ ہوں، بلکہ اس کو میرے خیال میں ایک حقیقت پسندانہ تجزیے کے طور پر قبول کر لینا چاہیے، اختلاف رائے کے حق کے ساتھ۔ جہاں تک ہمارے اس خطے یا علاقائی صورتحال کا تعلق ہے، کشمیر کے حوالے سے بالخصوص، میں یہاں اشارتاً اس قدر بھی کہنا چاہوں گا کہ مسئلہ کشمیر اس وقت ہندوستان ہو یا پاکستان، دونوں ممالک کے لیے ایک قومی مسئلے کی حیثیت اختیار کر گیا ہے۔ میں انڈیا کے بارے میں تو کہنے کا حق نہیں رکھتا، لیکن پاکستان اور پاکستانی قوم کے بارے میں دو ٹوک الفاظ میں یہ بات کہنا چاہتا ہوں کہ کشمیر کے مسئلے پر جو ہمارا موقف ہے وہ ایک قومی موقف ہے، اور اس پر حکومت ہو یا عوام، تمام طبقہ زندگی سے تعلق رکھنے والوں کا یکساں موقف ہے۔ اور سن 4849 کی قراردادوں کی بنیاد پر کشمیری عوام کے استصواب رائے کے حق کو ہم ایک قومی موقف کے طور پر اجاگر کرتے ہیں، اور آج تک ہمارے اس موقف میں کوئی تبدیلی نہیں آئی ہے۔ لیکن ساتھ ساتھ جہاں ہم اس میں حکمرانوں کے کردار کو دیکھتے ہیں، لیاقت نہرو پیکٹ سے لے کر اعلان لاہور تک معاہدات ہیں، ایکارڈز ہیں، پیکٹس ہیں، میرے خیال میں اگر ہم ان کے ٹیکسٹ کو پڑھیں گے تو مسئلہ کشمیر کے لیے کوئی مؤثر کردار کہیں دوربین سے مشکل سے نظر آئے گا ان کو پڑھتے ہوئے۔ اگر آج عالمی سطح پر اس مسئلے کو اجاگر کیا ہے تو یہ عوام کی قربانیوں نے اجاگر کیا ہے۔ حکمرانوں نے تو صرف اپنی سیاست کی حد تک اس کو ضرور اس پر بات کی ہے، لیکن عملی قربانیاں بہرحال پاکستان کے عوام نے، کشمیر کے عوام نے دی ہیں، اور بھرپور قربانیوں کے نتیجے میں آج اس مسئلے کو ایک بین الاقوامی مسئلے کی حیثیت ملی ہے۔ وہ مسئلہ جس کے بارے میں ہندوستان کا دعویٰ یہ ہے کہ یہ ہمارا داخلی مسئلہ ہے، اور شملہ معاہدے کے تحت مسئلہ کشمیر کو بائی لیٹرل مسئلے کے طور پر مذاکرات کے میز پر لانے سے انکار کر رہا تھا۔ آج یہ بات غنیمت ہے اور ہم اس کی قدر کرتے ہیں کہ وہ کشمیر کو ایک اہم مسئلے کے طور پر تسلیم کر رہے ہیں، اور اس پر بھی پاکستان کے ساتھ مذاکرات کرنے کے لیے آمادہ اور تیار نظر آ رہے ہیں۔